swinging these flies. Steelhead don't take that as an egg fly.
Right.
Like an egg-sucking leech doesn't exist to me in the world. You know, it's more like that hot spot, that color attracts them to it.
That. So
right
there we go.
Is the profile of the fly that I'm looking for, and then I'm just going to change the color. So this little guy that we're going to tie tonight is probably one of my early season best flies that I have, and for whatever reason, running green is going to be, you're going to have good success on the big man. So and we'll kind of dwell into that, and if people ask the right questions, I'll give up more and more and more, and if they don't, I'll tie really fast. Let's go.
All right, let's tie some flies.
All right. So the concept in my head, and by the way, if you also have not logged in and watched last week's video with Alex, there's a lot of good information in there, especially if you listen. So he mentioned when he first started tying that he wasn't very creative. And I was thinking back, and there's probably not a better streamer fisherman in my head from the guide standpoint, understanding what fish want to eat, than Alex. So he understands that he doesn't have to like create some magic. So for me, the same thing on the swing fly is that I'm going to create a profile that usually in the fall, I'm going to go to a bigger size. As the winter comes, I'm going to go smaller. And as spring goes, I'll probably even take another step smaller. So this profile for me is something that's in that 2 to 3 inch range. If you're understanding like other types of fishing, crankbait stuff, you're looking, you know, for a size 5, 6 type, or if you're understanding spinners, same thing, size 5 blade. And that's kind of what my head thinks of when I come into this. So we're going to go through, like usually in October season, we definitely have clearer water. So we're going to do an olive and silver. And one of the things that I grabbed from the bass side, watching some really good YouTubers out there, is understanding that silver is on the bottom scale of reflective property. So when you throw silver into the river on a sunny day, it's, even though you like your flash profiles, it's going to give you the least amount of bling. So coppers and golds are going to shine brighter than silver. So this fly runs off of more of a silver platform, and I kind of start all my flies like, how deep do I want to get, and how am I balancing my fly? So they're all going to have weight. So we're going to add weight to the bottom of this fly to start. And again, probably not good for the northern angler, but I like to tie all my swing flies off cotter pins. So shanks for me are a great platform to tie off. They just had a lot of sharp edges, and I kept breaking my thread. So I went into the cotter pin starting, and then the next question is like, well, what about a tube fly? And it's a great platform, like probably the best platform. I just can't tie it fast enough.
Sure.
So when I'm thinking from a guide fly standpoint, it's like every morning when I wake up, I tie 4 of these. And I'm out the door, and those are the colors that I think will work, and that's how I build my inventory, or what worked yesterday.
Hold on. John, there's a rumor going around that you actually don't sleep. So how does that work? By the way, it's no. I mean, I think you emailed me at 5:30 this morning.
I actually waited an hour and a half. The best part about your text notification was that I could see that it was ringing out like you're busy. And I was like, oh, I could text him anytime I wanted after I saw that. So anyway, yeah, so I'm probably one of the early risers. I know a lot of guys like to come home and tie at night. And for whatever reason, when I come home at night, I'm done. And then I'll start thinking, like the brain will start going 2:33, 3:30, and I just get up and it's time to go.
Yeah.
You know, so that's how I roll. So. All right, so we're going to run off some Power Pro here, and my favorite hook is an Owner 5377. I run it in the fall. I run it pretty big, you know, so the 5377 will have a tendency to bend. So the size 1 has landed everything up to 16 pounds so far this year, And the size 2 and then the size 4 is kind of where I'll lean towards later in the year. And it'll be a smaller hook, and then I can run it on a smaller profile. So I take my Power Pro and I double it. So right now I have 1 loop, and now I've just doubled it over. So I have 2 loops. So there's kind of like 4 strands here. And this will be the hardest part of my whole night tying, is if this will go smooth. So I twist it. I was just kind of like twisting it. So now I have a point. Take it through. And I'll open it up. And I'll pass it through and pull. Now I have 2 loops through there, giving that hook a little bit more support. I'll find the distance that I want to tie this, grab my thread, and I'll wrap it like a couple times, lock it in there, and then the cotter pin's nice because now I'm going to pass those ends through the big cotter pin, and now let's just start wrapping that back. And probably the most embarrassing thing you can have when you spent all day trying to get a steelhead on the swing is have this set up pull loose. And your fly is still tied to your mono, but your hook and your fish are gone. And that's kind of embarrassing. So
trim that off. You trim that off exceptionally fast, I would imagine.
Yep.
Nothing to see there.
So that little point that I brings up a valid, probably pre-question, is like, well, Jon, do you ever think about tying with wire? And yeah, I have tied with wire. And when wire kinks, wire will rust. And the next year, when you throw that same fly in the water and a steelhead grabs it, and Ed McCoy could vouch for this, your hook is gone again. So braid, as you know, if you've ever found a lure in a tree, never breaks down. And actually mono would be fine here too. I can just control this a little bit better on Power Pro.
Sure.
So that's my thing on it. So all right, so we back the thread up. Now we're gonna start building up here, and you can use a lot of different things. Today we brought some, what is this, UV double cut chenille. So
there you go.
Boom. This is an olive. And we'll just take a piece of this, and you can keep it on the card. Sometimes it's just like if you're tying in front of other people, you lose it and it falls on the floor. So you just cut a piece. Wrap our thread forward, come through, and just palmer this.
That's pretty long.
Yeah.
It's longer than I'd see with, UV polar chenille.
Yes. So this brings up, this fly for me has changed over time. And it used to probably, I don't even know if I had that step when we started. But this has been around for a couple years. So anyway, I used to run marabou next. And I started looking at my flies in the water, and it was all based on how I was building my head and how big my head was.
Sure.
Is that it felt like the vortex of water was passing through the head and going around the fly and then pulling that marabou back into the fly. And I don't know if marabou changed or if my style of tying changed, but I couldn't get the marabou to flap the flash anymore. So then I went to Creffer, and one of the better flies out there tied is the Bad Hair Day, and how that makes flash work. So anyway, I don't quite tie it in that way, but this gave basically my flash a place to bounce, and that's what I was looking for. So I'll just take a nice little hunk that's actually a little bit small and grab a little bit more here.
And while you're doing that, we did have a question that you covered briefly about why 2 pieces of Power Pro versus 1. And I think, you kind of have to see how limp one piece can really be to answer that. And you really want to make sure that hook stays behind behind your fly, I think, is kind of the
So
goal there.
Yeah, so the double piece was a trick that I learned when I was in Alaska and we were fishing for cohos. And the guides would tie their flies with the double piece of Power Pro. And it gave the hook a little bit more rigidness behind the fly. It wasn't dropping all the way down. And then that brought up like, well, heck, I'm going to try that little bite wire stuff and jewelry wire.
Sure.
And then you saw that that stuff would kink. So then you come back to Power Pro and then you start doing the double loop. And then you find the right hook that will pass through there, and they all don't work. But when I swing the fly, especially in a fast current, that hook's going to pop right back up. But in a soft current, like if you and I went fishing tomorrow, we're going to hunt the slowest water I can find. So that hook's going to drop down underneath the fly, and that fish is going to come up and grab behind the fly. And, you know, maybe everybody watching the video right now understands like how steelhead feed. And maybe there's someone that's not. So let's talk about that real quick.
I think that's a great
Alex talked about it in your last video. Again, watch that one. A lot of good information. And he talked about like rainbows come in behind the fly. Brown trout want to kill that head first. Rainbows, I always think of it as like a curiosity factor. You know, because they love to eat popcorn for a living, which for me is egg flies. But they get curious by other things. And they'll come in and investigate. And they almost want to just like barely put it in their mouth. You know, it's not like they have that attack instinct. Right. You know, and we've streamer fished a lot here, you know, especially on the Mana. And there's a lot of rainbows in that lower end. And you hardly ever see one. I'm not saying you don't see one. But corresponding to brown trout that like to kill things and chase things, rainbow trout are hard. So that's where that fluttering little slow presentation, you know, is key. So, and I think they said it, like Alex might have said it too, that Atlantic salmon, swing as fast as you can. Steelhead, how slow can you swing it? And that's why that hang down presentation is so vital.
Yep.
You know, because they want to come in and just investigate. So, all right. So we're going to line up our craft fur here to the length of our tail. So we just got to trim a little bit off. Add that and tie that in there. So now we have a good base, and you could probably swing that fly and it would work just fine. All right. This year, the motivation was, you know, changing. We had a little bit different color water this year, a lot clearer. So we kind of started trying some different blends, and we found that this Moonlight works really good, which is a little blend of silver, black, and pearl. And we're going to probably just look for, like, we want like 4 or 5 pieces of silver. So we're going to get rid of a little bit there. I like to put this right on the side. Pull. And then flip it over. And we're just going to grab it all again. Come up here. Come to the back. You know, kind of look where our hook is. And what I'll do is I'll hold it tight, and I don't want to come in and just hit it. So I'll pull it back, and I'll give it a little, and I'll bounce my scissors back and forth. And that just gives me a little bit of
taper.
There you go.
Yeah.
Feel free to add in the words as I stumble on camera.
I'd say you're doing better than I am. I don't know. I set off a little flustered tonight, I guess.
You don't have Brian here to make the humor.
That's right. He's my color commentary guy. Really.
We need him in the background. Is he logged in yet or said anything?
What I meant to do is get a cardboard cutout of him and just have him in the back and just, you know, maybe on one of those Roombas so it looked like he was walking around or something. Some Home Alone shenanigans, you know?
Right.
If we're going to reference some holiday movies.
Yep. Russ Madden influenced me a lot when we worked together. So good or bad, I guess you could say, but a lot of good because the guy can tie a really good fly. So he always called this next move the Mohawk. All right, so we're going to do a little Mohawk now. So I've grabbed this little variant, the micro pulsator strip in black and olive to give us a couple little stripes here. And we're going to we again measured our fly, and this is going to go right over the top. So what I'll normally do is pull the hair back and come in with the scissors, and that way the next piece still has those long guard fibers. Introduce that in there and just kind of lock in that strip. And that is a weak point in the fly, that point right there, if you tie in rabbit that way. But it seems to last. A lot of my flies will last longer than I need them to, so I can get 2 or 3 seasons out of a fly. So, all right. Now, how this fly always came about and what we used to call it was the perch. So this is, I believe they call this fire tiger. So this stuff, for me on the big man, is money. So I'm just going to keep that over the top. Pull it back. We'll do the same thing here. All right. So the biggest thing for me is color and understanding kind of what fish see. And again, every day in the guide boat, you know, you're getting a call from another guide like, hey, how you doing? You know, what'd you get them on? What color is always,
right.
Not where, what color, you know? So that for swinging flies or egg fishing, what color? So for me, like hot spotting, and last year we talked a lot about smallmouth, and there's definitely steelhead and smallmouth are my 2 biggest, like, understanding like UV tendencies. Mm-hmm. So a lot of times in these flies, the next part for me is setting up what this light will show me. All right, so we're going to use the UV light to solidify the glue at the end.
Plasma.
The plasma edition.
I don't know where they're going to go from here.
Anybody else, because it'll fry their eyes. And it's actually, when you put the glue in there, you'll feel the heat on your thumb.
I should have brought, you know, like welding glasses to put on.
So anyway, this feather is hot. And what do I mean by hot? So if I hit it with the light, you'll get, you maybe probably can't see it.
Up a little bit higher there, John.
Here's the other thing that I'll do. Like, can you see the eyeball on the fly?
Yeah.
All right.
Yep.
That's hot, right? Now it looks normal. Does it get hot again? All right. That for me is what hot means. So from here on, what I'm trying to do is develop like the attractor to the fly. So if you fish yarn, chartreuse glow bug yarn is a hot color, you know, and then there's other colors that are duller or dead. In under certain conditions, you need to change that. So this part of the fly right here, the flash, will always stay consistent, and now I'll start to change this part, the attractor part, the part that brings steelhead to the fly. So today we're going to run a hot feather, and if water is clear like it was this year, I'll usually run a duller feather, but today we're just going to give it a little bit of color. So
and while John's wrapping this, if you haven't used guinea before, it's not always the friendliest. You know, it's not quantity, it's quality usually. And you'll notice he's tying in at the tip, which is really key. It has a very thick stem as you work down that feather. And a lot of times you just get 2 wraps. If you have a sizable feather, it's 3 wraps. And it's a great feather for a hot spot. It's got that unique pattern that gives you the barring.
I'm going to tie off my thread here real quick because I'm going to spin it around. So how I tied it in on the tip is I always leave like a big section at the end to kind of lock it in a little bit so when I'm wrapping it doesn't spin out.
Right.
So right now I'm going to go in with my scissors and try to hit that right in the middle so that I get a little bit more. This can be like, okay, I got to tie it in again, step.
We did have a question if
No, we
boom.
did it right.
Yeah, okay.
So
I thought you said uh-oh.
no, not on camera.
We did have a
never do anything
question from Wayne in Grand Rapids.
Okay.
If this fly is a specific name.
Yeah, so the name of it, like amongst the guide crew. So again, at Mangled Fly, if you're like, I get the phone call or the text, what are you getting them on? I'll say the Perch.
Okay.
You know, so for me, it's been around in my box, you know, probably over 10 years. So it's changed a little bit. This year, my next step was how I dulled it out a little bit. We used to run like a really hot part.
Okay.
But I've never seen the big man this clear before.
Right.
So I'm going to talk about how I dulled it out this year. But it is just basically a perch. And again, the big man, if you had to think like a trout angler, there's a lot of darters in the big man. So if you go off that or the goby size of a bait fish, which you learn a ton if you have Kevin's book,
You should.
Yes, it's a must buy. If you haven't got it on your Christmas list yet, do it. Ann's Miller's books on bugs and Kevin Feinster's books on bait fish.
Yep.
So darters are probably the most common bait fish that we have. So it was always something like, how do I imitate that if I was thinking like a trout guy? And then how the color scheme started is that the guys coming out of certain boat launches throwing crankbaits were always throwing green. And I was like, all my swing flies were orange, black, and copper.
Right.
Right? With a little bit of like Kelly green. But I didn't have anything like heavy green, you know, so that's kind of where this came out, or I'm motivated by gear guys a lot.
Yeah.
So
I mean,
right.
I'd be lying if I didn't scroll through
You need
colors
this much
of things.
ice dub to get this done.
That's the amount for one fly, right?
Yes.
That's a lot comes out through the combing process.
Yes. It all starts
Or
over.
use a vacuum on that, is that right? It's
All right. So what I do is I take about this much, so a little pinch in each finger, and I bring them together, and I go on the side of it, and I'll just like do a light wrap, and I'll lock in, and another wrap, and I'll pull it back, and I'll come in here. And a lot of this is just going to pull out as extra, and we're going to worry about that in a second. All right, this color here was 2021's favorite color for minnow patterns for me. So this, I always assumed was a dead color.
Let me hold that down just a little bit. Oh, the Senyo's Laser Dub, light olive.
Light olive. And
Okay.
I always thought it was a dead color until I hit it with the light. And
With
it's
the
got
plasma.
a mix of a little bit of chartreuse and a little bit of orange in it. So we're going to take this out, and we're going to do that pinch. And if you watch last year's video how I tie bait fish flies, I'll usually leave it that long, but that's too long of a fiber for this head. So we're going to put it in our hand and pull. Bring it back together and pull. Bring it back together and pull. So we're cutting the fibers basically in half. All right, so now we're going to take that, bring it up and down, lock it in, pull on it, push it back, split them. And what that did for me, like under the UV light, is you're going to still see the chartreuse under it, but you're going to see the front part of the fly is duller. Before, when we have dirtier water, I'll go straight chartreuse. I'll also do, like, if you grab iced up orange, that's a dead color. It won't glow.
Right.
And I can put that behind the other green as well if I need like a duller fly, if it's like a really bright day. So the fly for me flashes pretty consistent, and I'll keep just changing the head to what I need. No different like if you and I were fishing and we were bead fishing or glow bug fishing, we would change our colors based on either A, how we were doing, or B, based on how much light was like coming into the river. And that's what I believe on the swing flies earlier in the year. And I don't take them to think like when I'm swinging these flies, steelhead don't take that as an egg fly.
Right.
Like an egg sucking leech doesn't exist to me in the world. it's more like that hot spot, that color attracts them to it.
Right.
And the movement gets them. So we're going to finish off our head here. Add a little glue. Hit it with the light. Look away. Cough. All right. Cut that.
What thread were you using there?
Oh, great question. I think it's the Danville stuff. Yep, Danville.
Again on the
210.
Danville.
What?
Again on the Danville.
Yeah, you have to.
It's popular.
Have to. Take my little comb here, and I'll start pulling on it a little bit, just kind of picking it apart. And now what I'm looking for, like when I put this in the water, it'll drape too far back. So now I'm just going to come in and clean it up.
If you were to give that fly a measurement, how long would you say that is, John? Pinky length?
So for me, it's very comfortable. Like, again, back to the popcorn.
Sure.
Like, they like smaller things, and it's interesting. Like, if I'm gonna just talk gear real quick.
Yeah.